What would you do if your entire world turned against you for a crime you never committed? When everyone you trusted branded you as dangerous, unworthy, a threat to the very pack that raised you? Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of Aria Blackwood, a young Betta whose life was shattered in a single night, only to discover that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected source. Sometimes, it takes an alpha king to see the truth that everyone else refuses to acknowledge. If you love stories of forbidden romance, pack politics, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our supernatural tales. This is a story of exile, power, and a love that could either destroy everything or rebuild it from the ashes. The scent of betrayal hung thick in the air as Aria Blackwood stood before the Council of Elders, her wrists bound with silver chains that burned against her skin. The great hall of the Moonridge Pack felt colder than the winter night outside, and every pair of eyes that stared at her held nothing but disgust and disappointment. The ancient stone walls seemed to close in around her as she waited for her fate to be decided. Tapestries depicting the pack's glorious history hung from the rafters, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled over her life. She had grown up in this hall, had attended countless ceremonies and celebrations here. Now it felt like a tomb. Aria Blackwood, Alpha Marcus's voice boomed through the chamber, each word like a physical blow. You stand accused of the murder of Elder Thompson and the theft of the sacred Moonstone. How do you plead? Aria's wolf whimpered inside her, confused and hurt by the accusations. The bond she had always felt with her pack, the sense of belonging that had defined her entire existence, was fracturing with each passing moment. She lifted her chin, meeting her alpha's gaze with as much dignity as she could muster. I plead innocent, Alpha Marcus. I would never— Silence! The alpha's hand slammed against the wooden podium, the sound echoing through the hall like a gunshot. The evidence speaks for itself. Your scent was found at the crime scene. The Moonstone was discovered hidden in your quarters. Elder Thompson's blood was on your clothes. The accusations hit her like physical blows. Each piece of evidence was damning, and she could see the doubt creeping into the faces of pack members who had once looked at her with respect and affection. Her training partner, James, wouldn't even meet her eyes. The pack mothers who had helped raise her after her parents' death turned away in shame. I was framed. Aria's voice cracked with desperation, the words tearing from her throat. Someone planted that evidence. I've served this pack faithfully for 23 years. I would never betray— Enough lies. Betta Harrison, her former mentor, stepped forward. The man who had trained her, who had been like a father to her since her parents died in a rogue attack when she was 15, now looked at her with pure revulsion. His weathered face, marked by years of protecting the pack, was twisted with disappointment and rage. I found the evidence myself, Aria. I trusted you, believed in you, and you spat on that trust. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Aria felt her knees buckle, but she forced herself to remain standing. Harrison had been the one to teach her how to fight, how to track, how to be a proper Betta. He had been her rock after her parents' death, the steady presence that had helped her find her place in the pack hierarchy. To see him look at her with such hatred was almost more than she could bear. Around the hall, pack members she had grown up with, had fought beside, had considered family, all turned their backs on her. Mrs. Chen, who had taught her to cook traditional pack recipes, young Tommy, whose first shift she had helped guide, even the Omega servants who had always greeted her with warm smiles, now looked at her with fear and disgust. The council has reached its decision, Alpha Marcus announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Aria Blackwood, you are hereby stripped of your rank, banished from the Moonridge Pack, and marked as a rogue. You have until dawn to leave our territory. If you are found within our borders after sunrise, you will be killed on sight. The formal words of banishment felt like a death sentence. To be marked as a rogue was to become less than nothing in werewolf society. No pack would take her in, no alpha would offer protection. She would be alone, hunted, with no hope of ever finding a place to belong again. The silver chains fell to the ground with a metallic clang as they were removed. Aria rubbed her raw wrists, feeling the burn of silver poisoning in her bloodstream. The metal had left angry red welts on her skin, marks that would take days to heal even with her enhanced werewolf metabolism. She looked around the hall one last time, searching for even one friendly face, one person who might believe in her innocence. She found none. "I didn't do this," she whispered. But her words were lost in the murmur of the crowd already dispersing. Pack members filed out of the hall, their conversations a low buzz of shock and disgust. She caught fragments of their words. Always knew there was something off about her. Poor Elder Thompson. Good riddance. As she walked toward the great doors, her childhood friend Sarah stepped into her path. For a moment, Aria's heart leaped with hope. Sarah had been her closest friend since childhood, the sister she had never had. Surely Sarah would believe her, would offer some comfort in this nightmare. "I hope you rot out there," Sarah spat, her eyes filled with hatred that cut deeper than any blade. "Thompson was like a grandfather to all of us, and you murdered him in cold blood." "I never want to see your face again." Aria stumbled backward as if she'd been slapped. The betrayal was complete now. Even her best friend, the person who knew her better than anyone, believed she was capable of murder. Without another word, she turned and ran from the hall, from the only home she'd ever known, from the life that had just been ripped away from her. The forest was dark and unwelcoming as she shifted into her wolf form, her silver-gray fur catching the moonlight. Her wolf was smaller than most betas, but she was fast and agile. She would need every advantage she could get if she was going to survive as a rogue. The transformation, usually a source of comfort and strength, now felt hollow and desperate. For 3 days, she ran. She avoided packed territories, stuck to the deep wilderness, and lived off whatever small game she could catch. Her wolf grew thinner, weaker, and the constant stress of being hunted began to take its toll. Sleep came in fitful bursts, always with one ear listening for the sound of pursuit. The few rabbits and squirrels she managed to catch barely sustained her, and she could feel her strength ebbing with each passing hour. The weather turned against her on the second day, a cold rain that soaked through her fur and chilled her to the bone. She found shelter where she could, under fallen logs, in shallow caves, anywhere that might provide a moment's respite from the elements. But the cold seeped into her bones, and she began to understand why so few rogues survived their first winter alone. On the 4th night, as she huddled in a cave trying to stay warm, she heard the howls. A hunting party. They had found her trail. Aria's heart raced as she recognized the voices, members of her former pack, led by Betta Harrison himself. They weren't just tracking her. They were hunting her with the intent to kill. The howls carried a note of excitement, the thrill of the hunt that made her blood run cold. These weren't the voices of wolves seeking justice. These were the sounds of predators who had found their prey. She ran again, pushing her exhausted body to its limits. Behind her, the howls grew closer, more urgent. Her paws slipped on the wet leaves, and she tumbled down a steep embankment, crying out in pain as her shoulder struck a rock. The impact sent shockwaves through her body, and she felt something pop in her shoulder joint. When she looked up, gasping and disoriented, she found herself face to face with the largest wolf she had ever seen. The wolf was pure black, with eyes like molten gold that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Power radiated from him in waves that made her wolf instinctively want to submit. But there was something else in his gaze. Curiosity, not hostility. His presence was overwhelming, a force of nature that made the very air around him seem to vibrate with energy. Behind him stood a dozen other wolves, all massive, all clearly alphas or high-ranking betas. Their formation was perfect, disciplined, speaking of military precision and absolute loyalty to their leader. She had stumbled into the territory of one of the most powerful packs in North America. The black wolf shifted, and Aria's breath caught in her throat. The man who stood before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and those same piercing gold eyes. Scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, telling the story of countless battles. Each mark spoke of survival, of victories hard won and enemies defeated. This was no ordinary alpha. This was Damon Blackthorne, the Alpha King. Well, well. His voice was deep and commanding, with just a hint of amusement. What do we have here? A little rogue trespassing in my territory. Aria shifted back to her human form, immediately regretting it as she realized she was now naked and vulnerable before the most powerful werewolf in the continent. She tried to cover herself with her arms, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. The cold air bit at her skin, and she shivered uncontrollably, whether from cold, fear, or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her teeth chattering. "I didn't know this was your territory. I was being hunted and Hunted?" The Alpha King's expression darkened, his golden eyes flashing with something dangerous. "By whom?" Before Aria could answer, the sound of approaching wolves filled the air. Betta Harrison and his hunting party burst through the trees, skidding to a halt when they saw the Alpha King and his pack. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the rustle of leaves in the wind. "Your Majesty." Harrison immediately dropped to one knee, his head bowed in the traditional gesture of submission to the Alpha King. The other pack members followed suit, their earlier bloodlust replaced by fear and respect. "We apologize for the intrusion. We're tracking a dangerous rogue who murdered one of our elders. She's extremely dangerous and this little thing?" Damon's gaze flicked to Aria, and she saw something that made her heart skip. Doubt. He didn't believe Harrison's words. "She looks more frightened than dangerous to me." "Don't let her appearance fool you, Your Majesty. She's a cold-blooded killer." "We have evidence." "Evidence can be fabricated," the Alpha King said quietly, and Harrison's head snapped up in shock. "I've seen it done before." Aria stared at him in amazement. This stranger, this powerful alpha who had every reason to hand her over to her former pack, was questioning their story. No one had questioned the evidence before. No one had even considered that she might be innocent. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, you will leave my territory, now." The command in Damon's voice was absolute, carrying the weight of centuries of royal authority. "And you will not pursue this woman while she is under my protection." "Protection?" Harrison's voice cracked with disbelief. "Your Majesty, she's a murderer!" Damon stepped forward, and his power filled the clearing like a physical force. Every wolf present, including Aria, felt the overwhelming urge to submit to his dominance. The air itself seemed to thicken with his authority, and Aria understood why he was called the Alpha King. This wasn't just political power, this was primal, ancient, the kind of dominance that had shaped werewolf society for millennia. "Are you questioning my judgment, Betta?" Harrison's face went pale. "No, Your Majesty. Of course not. But then leave. Now. Before I decide that your pack has overstayed its welcome in this region entirely." The threat was clear. Harrison and his hunting party had no choice but to retreat. But not before Harrison shot Aria a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently before disappearing into the trees. When they were gone, Damon turned back to Aria. She was shivering violently now. Whether from cold or shock, she wasn't sure. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the full weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Aria Blackwood." "Well, Aria Blackwood, it seems you're in need of sanctuary." He gestured to one of his pack members, who immediately stepped forward with a cloak. "And I'm in need of the truth." As the warm fabric settled around her shoulders, Aria looked up into those golden eyes and felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope, but she had no idea that accepting the Alpha King's protection would set in motion events that would change not just her life, but the entire supernatural world. The Blackthorne Pack's territory was unlike anything Aria had ever seen. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches forming a natural cathedral, while a crystal-clear river wound through the heart of the land. The pack house itself was a massive stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home, built into the side of a mountain with commanding views of the entire territory. The architecture spoke of centuries of power and tradition. Gothic spires reached toward the sky, and massive buttresses supported walls that had withstood countless attacks. Gargoyles perched on the corners of the building, their stone eyes seeming to watch everything that moved below. This wasn't just a pack house. It was a seat of power, a symbol of the Alpha King's dominance over the werewolf world. As they approached the main entrance, Aria became acutely aware of the stares from pack members. Word of her arrival had already spread, and she could hear the whispered conversations. The pack members were clearly well-trained and disciplined, but their curiosity was evident in their sideways glances and hushed tones. A rogue, the Alpha King brought her here. Himself? She's accused of murder. Look, how small she is. What could the king want with her? Damon seemed oblivious to the whispers, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He led her through corridors lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passed. Each painting told a story of power and authority, of men who had shaped the werewolf world through strength and cunning. The weight of history pressed down on her as she walked through halls that had witnessed centuries of political maneuvering and supernatural intrigue. The interior of the pack house was as impressive as the exterior. Tapestries depicting great battles hung from the walls, and suits of ancient armor stood guard in alcoves. Everything spoke of wealth, power, and a legacy that stretched back to the very founding of werewolf society. "You'll stay in the East Wing," he said, stopping before a heavy wooden door carved with intricate Celtic knotwork. "My personal quarters are in the West Wing, should you need anything." The room he showed her to was larger than her entire apartment back in Moonridge. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its dark wood frame carved with the same Celtic patterns that decorated the door. A fireplace crackled warmly in the corner, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. French doors opened onto a balcony that overlooked the forest, providing a view that took her breath away. Rich tapestries covered the walls, depicting scenes of wolves running through moonlit forests. A writing desk sat near the window, stocked with fine paper and ink. Fresh flowers had been placed on the nightstand, their sweet scent a welcome contrast to the masculine atmosphere of the room. "Why are you helping me?" Aria asked as Damon lingered in the doorway, his large frame filling the entrance. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those intense golden eyes. She could see him weighing his words, choosing them carefully. "Because I know what it's like to be falsely accused. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because my wolf recognizes something in you that others have missed." The way he said "recognizes" made her pulse quicken, but before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving her alone with her thoughts and 1,000 questions. Over the next few days, Aria tried to settle into life at the Blackthorne pack house. She was given clothes that fit perfectly. Somehow Damon had managed to guess her size exactly. The garments were of finer quality than anything she had ever owned, made from soft fabrics in rich colors that complemented her silver-gray hair and pale skin. She was provided with food that was far superior to anything she had eaten in her former pack, and freedom to roam the territory, though she noticed she was always accompanied by at least one pack member. Protection or surveillance, she wasn't sure which. The guards were polite but professional, maintaining a respectful distance while ensuring she was never truly alone. The pack members were polite but distant. She was an outsider, a rogue under their alpha's protection, and they didn't know what to make of her. Their conversations would stop when she entered a room, and she could feel their curious stares following her wherever she went. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with pity, but none with the warmth she had once known in her former pack. All except for Elena, Damon's younger sister, who seemed genuinely curious about the mysterious woman her brother had brought home. Elena was beautiful in the way that all powerful werewolves were, with the same golden eyes as her brother, but a softer, more approachable demeanor. Her dark hair fell in waves to her shoulders, and she moved with the confident grace of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "You know, he's never done anything like this before," Elena said as they walked through the pack's extensive gardens. The grounds were meticulously maintained, with flower beds arranged in intricate patterns and hedges trimmed to perfection. A fountain bubbled in the center of the garden, its water catching the afternoon sunlight. Damon doesn't make impulsive decisions. Everything he does is calculated, planned. But bringing you here, she shrugged. That was pure instinct. Maybe he just felt sorry for me, Aria replied, though even as she said it, she didn't believe it. There had been something in his eyes that night, something that went beyond mere pity. The way he had looked at her, the protective stance he had taken, it had felt personal in a way that charity never could. Damon doesn't do pity, Elena laughed, the sound like silver bells in the afternoon air. Trust me, I've known him my whole life. He's the most pragmatic person I've ever met. If he's protecting you, it's because he believes you're innocent. And if Damon believes it, then it's probably true. They paused by a rose garden, where dozens of varieties bloomed in a riot of color. Elena picked a white rose and handed it to Aria, her expression thoughtful. He's been different since you arrived, Elena continued. More restless. He spends hours in his study, making phone calls, sending messages. He's investigating something, and I think it has to do with you. That evening, Aria was summoned to Damon's private study. The room was lined with books from floor to ceiling, their leather spines creating a tapestry of knowledge and history. A fire burned in the massive stone fireplace, casting warm light over the rich wood paneling. The scent of old books and wood smoke filled the air, creating an atmosphere of scholarly contemplation. Damon sat behind an antique desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of oak. Several files spread out before him, their contents hidden from her view. Maps covered one wall, marked with pins and colored strings that suggested some kind of investigation or military planning. Sit, he said without looking up. We need to talk. Aria took the chair across from him, her heart racing. Had he changed his mind about helping her? Had he discovered something that proved her guilt after all? I've been investigating your case, he said, finally meeting her eyes. The evidence against you is convenient. Too convenient. What do you mean? Damon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. Elder Thompson was killed with a silver blade between 10 and 11 p.m. on the night of the new moon. You were supposedly seen leaving his quarters at 10:30. But I have it on good authority that you were actually at the PAC's training grounds until at least 11:15. Sparring with 3 other PAC members, Aria's eyes widened. How did you— I have my sources. The question is, why didn't any of those PAC members speak up for you during your trial? I don't know. Maybe they forgot? Or maybe they were scared? Or maybe they were told to keep quiet. Damon's expression darkened. Tell me about your relationship with Alpha Marcus. Aria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The memory of Marcus's advances still made her skin crawl. He's been our Alpha for 15 years. He's always been fair, just that's not what I asked. What was your personal relationship with him? Heat flooded Aria's cheeks. There wasn't one. Not really. He had expressed interest in making me his mate, but I declined. When? About 6 months ago. He said the pack needed a strong Luna, and that I would be perfect for the role. But I didn't love him, and I told him so. The memory was still painful. Marcus had been so confident, so sure that she would accept his proposal. When she had refused, his expression had turned cold, calculating. Damon nodded slowly. And how did he take your rejection? Not well. He said I was making a mistake, that I would regret it. He became distant after that. Cold. I thought he was just embarrassed, but now— She trailed off as the implications hit her. You think he framed me? I think a rejected alpha with a wounded ego is capable of many things, especially when that rejection becomes public knowledge. Damon pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. This is the stone that was supposedly found in your room. Notice anything unusual about it? Aria studied the image carefully. The Moonstone was a sacred artifact, passed down through generations of the Moonridge pack. She had seen it countless times during ceremonies and rituals, had memorized every detail of its surface. But this stone— the inscription, she whispered. It's wrong. The ancient runes are backwards. Exactly. This is a fake. A very good fake, but a fake nonetheless. Someone went to great lengths to frame you, Aria. The question is why? Before Aria could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the sound of running feet echoed through the corridors. Damon was on his feet instantly, his body tense and alert, every muscle coiled for action. The study door burst open, and Marcus, the Alpha King's Betta, rushed in. His face was flushed with exertion, and his eyes held a note of urgency that made Aria's blood run cold. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Alpha Marcus of Moonridge is here with a full war party. He's demanding we hand over the rogue, and he's threatening to declare war if we refuse. Damon's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as his power filled the space. Is he now? How interesting. What are your orders, Your Majesty? Damon looked at Aria, and she saw something fierce and protective in his gaze. Tell Alpha Marcus that if he wants to discuss the matter, he can request an audience like any other Alpha. But he will not set foot on my territory with a war party and make demands. And if he refuses? A slow, dangerous smile spread across Damon's face. Then he'll learn why I'm called the Alpha King. As Marcus hurried away to deliver the message, Damon turned back to Aria. It seems your former Alpha is more desperate to get you back than one would expect for a simple murderer. What does that mean? It means, my dear Aria, that you're far more important than you realize. And Alpha Marcus knows something that we don't. He moved around the desk to stand before her, his presence overwhelming and comforting at the same time. But I promise you this, I will not let him take you. Not until we know the truth. Aria looked up at him, this powerful man who had risked everything to protect a stranger, and felt something shift inside her chest. It was dangerous, this growing attraction to the Alpha King. He was so far above her station, so powerful and important, while she was nothing but a disgraced rogue. But when he looked at her like that, with such intensity and determination, she almost believed that she could be worth fighting for. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing all this for me? Damon reached out and gently touched her cheek, his thumb tracing along her jawline. His touch was warm, gentle, completely at odds with the dangerous power that radiated from him. Because from the moment I saw you in that forest, my wolf has been telling me that you're mine to protect. And I've learned to trust my wolf's instincts. The word mine sent a shiver through Aria's entire body. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed, feeling safe for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Damon, she breathed. Your Majesty. Marcus's voice echoed through the corridors again, more urgent this time. Alpha Marcus is refusing to leave. He says he'll wait as long as it takes, and more packs are arriving to support him. Damon's hand dropped from her face, and the moment was broken, but the intensity in his eyes remained, along with a promise that made her heart race. It seems we're about to be under siege, he said grimly, and I have a feeling this is only the beginning. As if to emphasize his point, a howl echoed across the territory, long, mournful, and filled with threat. It was answered by another, then another, until the night was filled with the sound of dozens of wolves calling for war. Aria moved to the window and looked out at the forest. In the distance, she could see the glow of campfires and the shadows of wolves moving between the trees. An army was gathering at their doorstep, all because of her. Maybe I should just go, she said quietly. Turn myself in. It's not worth starting a war over. No. Damon's voice was absolute. You're under my protection now, and I don't abandon those who trust me. Besides, he moved to stand beside her at the window. I have a feeling that if we give you up now, we'll never learn the truth about what really happened that night. And if we don't? How many wolves will die because of me? Damon turned to face her fully, his hands gripping her shoulders. Listen to me, Aria. You are not responsible for their choices. You didn't ask to be framed, you didn't ask to be hunted, and you didn't ask for any of this. But you're here now under my protection, and I will not let them take you. The conviction in his voice made her believe, for the first time since this nightmare began, that maybe she really could be innocent. Maybe she really could be worth saving. But as another howl echoed through the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The siege lasted 3 days. Alpha Marcus had positioned his forces strategically around the Blackthorne territory, cutting off all major routes in and out. More packs arrived daily, allies of Moonridge who believed they were helping to capture a dangerous murderer. The tension in the air was so thick it was almost suffocating, and the very forest seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the violence to come. From her window, Aria could see the enemy encampment spreading like a disease through the woods. Smoke from their fires created a haze that blocked out the stars, and the constant sound of howling and snarling made sleep nearly impossible. The psychological warfare was working. Everyone in the Blackthorne packhouse was on edge, jumping at shadows and snapping at each other over minor disagreements. Aria barely slept, consumed by guilt over the situation she had brought to Damon's doorstep. Every time she looked out her window, she could see more campfires, more wolves, more potential casualties in a war that was all about her. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like a physical force, making it hard to breathe. She had tried to make herself useful, helping in the kitchens and tending to the pack's children, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They were polite, respectful even, but she was still the outsider who had brought danger to their home. The mothers held their children a little closer when she passed, and the warriors looked at her with expressions that mixed protection with resentment. Elena had tried to keep her spirits up, bringing her books from the library and engaging her in conversation about pack politics and history. But even Elena's usual cheerfulness was strained, and Aria could see the worry in her golden eyes. "Damon's been in meetings all day," Elena said on the second evening, settling into a chair by the fireplace in Aria's room. "The other Alpha Kings are demanding to know why he's risking war over a rogue. Some are threatening to withdraw their support if this escalates." "Maybe they're right," Aria said quietly, staring into the flames. "Maybe I'm not worth all this trouble." "Don't say that," Elena said firmly. "Damon doesn't make decisions lightly. If he's protecting you, it's because you're important. More important than you realize." On the third night, Aria made a decision. She would sneak out and surrender herself to Marcus. It was the only way to prevent bloodshed. Damon had done more than enough for her already. She wouldn't let him start a war over someone like her. The plan was simple: slip past the guards, make her way to the perimeter, and turn herself over to Marcus's forces. She waited until the early hours of the morning, when the guard rotations were changing and attention might be divided. Wrapping herself in a dark cloak, she crept through the corridors toward the main entrance, her heart pounding with each step. But as she reached the main hall, a hand grabbed her arm and spun her around with supernatural speed. "Going somewhere?" Damon's voice was low and dangerous, his golden eyes blazing in the dim light. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. You were just about to do something incredibly stupid." His golden eyes blazed in the dim light, and she could see his wolf very close to the surface. "Did you really think you could sneak past my guards? Past me?" "I can't let you start a war because of me," she said desperately, trying to pull free from his grip. "Too many innocent people will die." "And you think surrendering yourself to Marcus will save them?" Damon stepped closer, backing her against the stone wall. His body radiated heat and power, and she could smell his scent: pine, leather, and something uniquely masculine that made her wolf whimper with want. "You think he'll just take you and leave peacefully?" "I have to try." "No." His hands braced against the wall on either side of her head, trapping her between his arms and the cold stone. "You have to trust me. I told you I would protect you, and I meant it, but why?" The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. "Why does it matter so much to you? I'm nobody, Damon. I'm just a disgraced Betta with no pack, no family, no—" His mouth crashed down on hers, cutting off her words. The kiss was fierce, desperate, full of all the tension that had been building between them for days. His lips were warm and demanding, and she could taste the hint of whiskey on his breath. Aria melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her fear and longing into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. their foreheads pressed together in the intimate darkness of the hallway. "You are not nobody," Damon said roughly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You are—" He seemed to struggle with the words, as if admitting them would change everything. "My wolf recognized you the moment I saw you." "You're my mate, Aria!" The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. "That's impossible. I would have felt it too. Not if your wolf was suppressed. Tell me, have you been taking any medications? Herbs? Anything that might affect your wolf's senses?" Aria's mind raced, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed suddenly clicking into place. "The pack doctor gave me supplements. Said they would help with my training, make me stronger. I've been taking them for months." Damon's expression darkened, his jaw clenching with barely controlled rage. "What kind of supplements?" "I don't know. Small white pills. Dr. Hendricks said they were vitamins, but—" She trailed off as a horrible realization dawned. "They weren't vitamins, were they? Wolf's bane extract, most likely. In small doses, it can suppress a wolf's natural instincts, including the ability to recognize their mate." Damon's hands clenched into fists, and she could see his wolf fighting for control. "Someone has been drugging you, Aria, keeping you from recognizing what you are to me. But why would—" She stopped, her blood running cold as the implications sank in. "Marcus. He wanted me as his mate. If I couldn't recognize my true mate, I might have eventually accepted him. And if you had mated with him, the bond with me would have been impossible to form." Damon's voice was deadly quiet, each word dripping with controlled fury. "He's been planning this for months. Maybe longer." Before Aria could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Elena appeared, her face pale with urgency and her usually perfect hair disheveled. "Damon, we have a problem. Dr. Hendricks is here. He's asking for sanctuary, and he says he has information about Aria's case." Damon and Aria exchanged glances, the weight of this new development settling over them like a shroud. "Bring him to my study," Damon ordered. "And Elena? Make sure he's searched for weapons first." 20 minutes later, Dr. Hendricks sat across from them in Damon's study, his hands shaking as he accepted a cup of coffee. The elderly man looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually neat appearance disheveled and his eyes darting nervously around the room. His medical bag sat at his feet, and Aria noticed that his hands bore fresh scratches, as if he had been running through the forest. "I couldn't stay silent any longer," he said without preamble, his voice cracking with emotion. "What they're doing to you, Aria? It's wrong. It's all wrong. Who is doing?" Damon's voice was carefully controlled, but Aria could see the tension in his shoulders. "Marcus. Betta Harrison. Even some of the elders." Dr. Hendricks set down his cup with trembling hands, the porcelain rattling against the saucer. "They planned it all. The murder, the frame-up, everything." Aria felt the world tilt around her, her vision blurring at the edges. "Elder Thompson. He's really dead?" "Oh yes, he's dead. But not by your hand." The doctor's voice was heavy with guilt, and tears tracked down his weathered cheeks. "Marcus killed him. Thompson had discovered the truth about the supplements I was giving you. He was going to expose everything at the next council meeting." "The supplements," Damon said, his voice deadly calm. "Wolf's bane extract?" Dr. Hendricks nodded miserably, his shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "Marcus threatened my granddaughter. Said if I didn't help him, she would have an accident. I never wanted to hurt you, Aria. You have to believe that. But Sarah is all I have left in this world." "Why?" Aria's voice was barely a whisper, her world crumbling around her. "Why go to all this trouble?" "Because you're not just any Betta," Dr. Hendricks said, looking directly at her with eyes full of regret and fear. "Your bloodline. Your grandmother was Luna Blackwood, wasn't she? Of the Silver Moon Pack?" Aria nodded, confused. Her grandmother had died when she was young, and her parents had rarely spoken of their family history. She had always assumed it was because the memories were too painful. Her grandmother had died in the same rogue attack that had claimed most of the Silver Moon Pack. The Silver Moon Pack wasn't just any pack, the doctor continued, his voice growing stronger as he revealed the truth he had carried for so long. They were the original royal pack before the Great War 50 years ago. Your grandmother was the last true Luna Queen before the pack was destroyed. Damon went very still, his golden eyes fixed on the doctor with laser-like intensity. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Aria isn't just a Betta, she's the last heir to the Silver Moon bloodline. By rights, she should be Luna Queen. Dr. Hendricks looked directly at Aria, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. Marcus knew this. He's known for years. If he could mate with you, he would have a claim to the throne. He would be king. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Aria stared at the doctor in shock, her mind reeling from the revelation. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, about her place in the world, was a lie. That's impossible, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm nobody special. You're the rightful Luna Queen, Damon said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and something that might have been destiny. And I'm the Alpha King. If we were to mate, the bloodlines would be united, Dr. Hendricks finished, his voice trembling with the weight of prophecy. The old prophecies would be fulfilled. The werewolf world would have its true rulers again. Suddenly, everything made sense. Marcus's obsession with her, the lengths he had gone to frame her, the army gathering outside their doors. This wasn't just about a rejected mating proposal or a murdered elder. This was about power on a scale Aria had never imagined. About the very future of werewolf society. There's more, Dr. Hendricks said reluctantly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The real Moonstone, the one that was supposedly stolen, Marcus has it. He's been using it to perform dark rituals, trying to artificially enhance his power. That's why he needed you gone. You're the only one who can wield the stone's true power. Where is it? Damon demanded, his voice carrying the full authority of the Alpha King. Hidden in his private chambers. But Damon, you have to understand, he's not acting alone. There are other alphas involved, other packs who want to see the old bloodlines destroyed forever. If they can kill Aria and eliminate the Silver Moon line completely, they can reshape the werewolf world however they want. Damon finished grimly, his expression darkening with understanding. A commotion outside interrupted them, the sound of shouting and running feet filling the air. The very walls seemed to shake with the force of whatever was happening beyond the pack house. Elena burst through the door without knocking, her face pale with terror. Damon, they're attacking. Marcus has broken the siege. They're coming through the eastern border. Damon was on his feet instantly, his body shifting into the commanding presence of a war leader. How many? At least 200 wolves. Maybe more. And Damon... Elena's face was pale with shock. They're not just trying to capture Aria anymore. They're trying to kill everyone. This is a full assault. The sound of battle erupted outside, snarls, howls, and the clash of wolf against wolf. The scent of blood and smoke began to seep through the windows, and Aria could hear the screams of the wounded mixing with the sounds of combat. Damon moved to the window and looked out at his territory, now lit by the glow of fires and the chaos of war. His expression was grim, but there was no fear in his golden eyes, only cold, calculating fury. They're not here to negotiate, he said grimly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. They're here to eliminate the threat to their power permanently. He turned to Aria, his expression fierce and determined, every inch the Alpha King preparing for war. This ends tonight. One way or another? What do you mean? I mean it's time for the Luna Queen to claim her birthright. Damon moved to a cabinet and pulled out an ornate silver dagger, its blade gleaming with ancient runes. And it's time for the Alpha King to remind everyone why that title isn't just ceremonial. As the sounds of battle grew closer, Aria realized that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. She wasn't just fighting for her innocence anymore. She was fighting for the future of their entire world. But first, they had to survive the night. The battle raged through the night like something out of a nightmare. From the windows of the pack house, Aria could see wolves locked in deadly combat, their snarls and howls echoing across the territory. The scent of blood and smoke filled the air, and with each passing hour, the fighting drew closer to the main building. The ancient stone walls that had protected the Blackthorne pack for centuries now shook under the assault. Windows shattered from the force of bodies being thrown against them, and the sound of claws scraping against stone created a symphony of violence that made Aria's teeth ache. Damon had transformed into the Alpha King in every sense of the word. Gone was the man who had gently touched her face and kissed her in the corridor. In his place stood a warrior, a leader, a force of nature that commanded absolute respect and obedience. His presence filled every room he entered, and even the most seasoned warriors looked to him for guidance with expressions of complete trust. "Elena, take the non-combatants to the safe rooms," he ordered, strapping on armor that looked like it had been forged for ancient kings. The black metal gleamed with protective runes, and the sight of him in full battle regalia was both terrifying and magnificent. "Marcus, coordinate the eastern defenses, and someone get me a count of our casualties." "Damon," Aria said as his pack members hurried to follow his orders, their movements precise and efficient despite the chaos around them. "Let me help. I can fight, no." His voice was absolute, brooking no argument. "You're the primary target. If they capture me, this all ends anyway," she interrupted, her own wolf rising to meet his dominance. "But if I hide while your people die protecting me, I'll never be able to live with myself." Dr. Hendricks, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward with surprising courage. "She's right, Your Majesty. And there's something else you should know. The Luna Queen's power isn't just ceremonial. If Aria can access her true abilities—" "What abilities?" Aria demanded, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "The power to command any wolf, regardless of pack loyalty. The ability to heal with a touch. And most importantly," the doctor's eyes were grave, "the power to break artificial bonds and compulsions." Damon's eyes sharpened with understanding. "You think Marcus has been using dark magic to control his allies?" "I know he has. Some of those wolves out there aren't fighting by choice. They've been compelled, their wills bent to his purpose. Only a true Luna Queen can break that kind of control." Dr. Hendricks pulled a small vial from his medical bag, its contents glowing with a soft silver light. "This is the antidote to the wolf's bane. It will restore your natural abilities, but the process will be intense." A massive crash shook the building as something, or someone, slammed into the main doors with tremendous force. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the halls, and Aria could hear the triumphant howls of the attackers as they breached the first line of defense. "They've breached the perimeter," Elena reported, her face pale but determined, a silver sword gleaming in her hand. "They'll be inside within minutes." Damon looked at Aria, conflict clear in his golden eyes. She could see him weighing the risks, calculating the odds, trying to find a way to protect her while still winning this war. "If you do this, there's no going back. Once you claim your power, you'll be a target for the rest of your life." "I'm already a target," Aria replied, reaching for the vial with steady hands. "At least this way I can fight back." Another crash, closer this time. The sound of wolf claws on stone echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the screams of the wounded and the dying. The battle was no longer at their gates. It was in their home. How do I access this power? Aria asked Dr. Hendricks urgently, uncorking the vial and staring at its glowing contents. "You need the Moonstone. The real one. It's the focus for the Luna Queen's abilities, passed down through your bloodline for generations." His voice was urgent, desperate. "But first you must purge the wolf's bane from your system, which is currently in Marcus's possession," Damon said grimly, his hand moving to the hilt of his sword. "Then we go get it," Aria said with more confidence than she felt, and before anyone could stop her, she drank the entire contents of the vial. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Fire raced through her veins, and she felt her wolf awakening from what felt like a long, drugged sleep. Power flooded through her body, ancient and primal, and suddenly she could sense every wolf in the territory, their emotions, their pain, their very souls. The main doors exploded inward, and the first wave of attackers poured into the pack house. But these weren't the wolves Aria remembered from her former pack. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and they moved with a coordination that spoke of magical compulsion rather than natural pack instincts. Foam flecked their muzzles, and their movements were jerky, unnatural. Compelled wolves, Dr. Hendricks confirmed, his voice filled with horror. They won't stop until they're dead or the compulsion is broken. Damon shifted into his massive black wolf form, and Aria was struck again by his sheer size and power. He was easily twice the size of a normal alpha, his presence radiating dominance that made even the compelled wolves hesitate. His fur was so dark it seemed to absorb light, and his golden eyes blazed with the fury of a true king. But hesitation wasn't enough. The compelled wolves attacked as one, a wave of fangs and claws that crashed against the Blackthorne pack's defenses like a tsunami of violence. Aria shifted as well, her silver-gray wolf now crackling with newfound power. She was still smaller than the others, but she could feel the difference immediately. Her senses were sharper, her strength greater. And there was something else, a connection to every wolf around her that she had never experienced before. She darted between the larger combatants, using her speed and agility to strike at vulnerable points before dancing away from retaliation. But now her attacks carried more than just physical force. They carried the authority of the Luna Queen, and she could see confusion flickering in the red eyes of the compelled wolves. But for every attacker they brought down, 2 more seemed to take their place. They were being overwhelmed, and Aria could feel the desperation of Damon's pack members as they fought against impossible odds. "We need to get to Marcus," Damon's voice echoed in her mind through their newly formed mate bond, the connection stronger now that her abilities had been restored. "End this at the source. Where is he?" "Leading the assault on the eastern wing." "If we can break through—" A new scent hit Aria's nose, one that made her wolf snarl with recognition and rage. Marcus himself had entered the building, and he wasn't alone. Betta Harrison flanked him, along with several other wolves she recognized from her former pack. But there were others too, alphas from different territories, their eyes glowing with the same unnatural red light as the compelled wolves. But it was the object in Marcus's hands that made her heart race. The Moonstone, the real one this time, pulsed with silver light, and she could feel its power calling to her across the room like a siren song. "Aria!" Marcus's voice boomed over the sounds of battle, amplified by the stone's power. "Enough of this madness! Come with me now, and I'll spare the Alpha King's life." "Liar!" she snarled, her wolf's voice carrying clearly through the chaos, enhanced by her royal bloodline. "I'm offering you one last chance to do this the easy way," Marcus continued, raising the Moonstone higher. The silver light intensified, and several of the compelled wolves stopped fighting, turning to stare at the stone with blank, empty eyes. "Mate with me willingly, and no one else has to die." "Never," Aria growled, her voice carrying a note of absolute authority that made several of the compelled wolves whimper. Marcus's expression darkened with fury and madness. "Then you've chosen the hard way." He began to chant in the old language, words of power that made the Moonstone flare with brilliant light. The compelled wolves turned as one toward Damon, their red eyes now blazing with murderous intent that was terrifying in its single-minded focus. "Kill the Alpha King," Marcus commanded, his voice echoing with dark power. "Bring me the girl alive!" Aria watched in horror as dozens of wolves converged on Damon. Even with his incredible power, he couldn't fight them all. She had to do something, and she had to do it now. Without thinking, she launched herself across the room toward Marcus, her newly awakened power surging through her like liquid lightning. If she could get the Moonstone away from him, maybe she could break his control over the others. But Betta Harrison intercepted her, his massive brown wolf slamming into her with bone-crushing force. They rolled across the floor, snapping and clawing at each other, while around them the battle raged on with increasing ferocity. "You should have accepted Marcus's offer when you had the chance," Harrison snarled as they grappled, his claws raking across her ribs. Now you'll watch everyone you care about die." "The only one dying tonight is Marcus," Aria replied, managing to rake her claws across his muzzle while channeling her royal power into the strike. Harrison howled in pain and rage, but before he could retaliate, a silver blur crashed into him. Elena, in her wolf form, had joined the fight, her movements graceful and deadly as she engaged the larger male. "Go." Elena's voice echoed in Aria's mind, strained with effort. "Get the stone!" Aria didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward Marcus, who was still chanting, the Moonstone's light growing brighter with each word. But as she got closer, she felt something else. A pull, a connection to the stone that went deeper than anything she had ever experienced. The stone wasn't just calling to her. It was recognizing her. It was coming home. Marcus saw her coming and raised his free hand, dark energy crackling around his fingers like black lightning. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The energy blast hit Aria square in the chest, sending her flying backward. Pain exploded through her body. But as she hit the ground, something extraordinary happened. The Moonstone's light suddenly changed from silver to pure white, and the pull she had been feeling became a roar. Power flooded through her veins, ancient and primal and absolutely right. She could feel the presence of every Luna Queen who had come before her, their strength flowing into her, their wisdom guiding her. She was the Luna Queen. This was her birthright. This was her destiny. Aria rose to her feet, and every wolf in the room, compelled or not, stopped fighting to stare at her. White light emanated from her skin, and her eyes blazed with the same pure radiance as the Moonstone. The very air around her seemed to shimmer with power, and she could feel the ancient magic of her bloodline awakening fully for the first time. "Release them," she commanded, her voice carrying the absolute authority of generations of Luna Queens. The words resonated with power that made the very stones of the building vibrate. "Release them all, Marcus." Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale with shock and growing terror. "Impossible. You can't access the power without the stone." "I don't need the stone," Aria said, taking a step forward. The white light around her intensified, and she could feel the compelled wolves beginning to shake off their artificial bonds. "I am the stone's true master. I am the Luna Queen, and you will release my people. Now." The compelled wolves began to shake their heads, the red glow fading from their eyes as her power washed over them like a cleansing tide. One by one, they collapsed to the ground, freed from Marcus's control but exhausted by the ordeal. She could feel their confusion, their horror at what they had been forced to do, and her heart ached for them. "This isn't over," Marcus snarled, clutching the Moonstone to his chest like a shield. "Even if you have the power, you don't have the knowledge. You don't know how to use it properly." "Then teach me," Aria said, her voice deadly calm, each word carrying the weight of royal command. "Or face the consequences of your crimes." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor and filled with madness. "You think you've won? You think this ends here?" He raised the Moonstone above his head, his eyes wild with desperation. "If I can't have the power, then no one can." He brought the stone down hard toward the floor, and Aria felt her heart stop. If the Moonstone shattered, the Luna Queen's power would be lost forever, and with it, any hope of restoring balance to the werewolf world. But before the stone could hit the ground, Damon was there. His massive wolf form crashed into Marcus, sending both of them tumbling away from the stone. Aria lunged forward and caught the Moonstone before it could fall, gasping as its power merged fully with her own. The sensation was indescribable. Centuries of knowledge, power, and wisdom flooded through her mind like a river of starlight. She could feel every wolf in the territory, could sense their pain, their fear, their hope, and she could heal them. White light exploded outward from her position, washing over the entire pack house like a wave of pure healing energy. Wounds closed, broken bones mended, and the exhausted wolves who had been freed from compulsion found their strength returning. The very air seemed to sing with power, and for a moment, the world was perfect and whole. When the light faded, Aria stood in the center of the room, the Moonstone floating above her palm, its silver light now perfectly synchronized with her own white radiance. She felt complete for the first time in her life, as if a missing piece of her soul had finally been restored. Marcus lay pinned beneath Damon's massive paws, his face twisted with rage and defeat. The other attacking alphas had fled when the compulsion broke, leaving him alone and powerless. "It's over, Marcus," Aria said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your crimes against the Silver Moon bloodline, against Elder Thompson, against me, they end here." "You can't prove anything," Marcus spat, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't need to prove anything," Aria replied, raising her hand. "I can see the truth. The Luna Queen's power shows me everything. Every lie you've told, every life you've destroyed, every innocent wolf you've compelled to do your bidding," she gestured. And images appeared in the air above them. Marcus killing Elder Thompson in cold blood, planting evidence in her room, threatening Dr. Hendrix's granddaughter, performing dark rituals with the stolen Moonstone. The assembled wolves, both Blackthorne pack members and the freed attackers, stared in horror at the revelations. "The penalty for regicide and treason against the royal bloodlines is death," Aria announced, her voice echoing through the hall. "But I'm not my ancestors. I believe in justice, not vengeance." She looked down at Marcus, this man who had destroyed her life and tried to steal her birthright. She could feel the expectations of everyone around her, the desire for revenge, for blood. But that wasn't who she was. "Marcus of Moonridge, you are hereby stripped of your alpha status and banished from all pack territories. You will live as a lone wolf, with no pack, no family, no power. And if you ever threaten another innocent life, I will know, and I will find you." The white light flared once more, and Marcus screamed as his alpha power was ripped away from him. When it faded, he was just a man, broken, powerless, and utterly defeated. "Take him away," Damon ordered, shifting back to his human form. "Make sure he's escorted far from our territory." As Marcus was dragged away, still ranting about injustice and stolen power, Aria finally allowed herself to collapse. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the full weight of what had happened was beginning to sink in. Damon was beside her instantly, pulling her into his arms. "Are you all right?" "I think so," she said, though she was shaking. "It's just, everything's different now. I can feel every wolf for miles around. I can sense their emotions, their pain, their joy. It's overwhelming." "You'll learn to control it," Damon said gently, stroking her hair. "And I'll help you. We'll figure this out together." Aria looked up at him. This incredible man who had risked everything to protect her, who had believed in her innocence when no one else would. "Together," she agreed. "The Alpha King and the Luna Queen. Is that a proposal?" Damon asked, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe," Aria replied, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Are you accepting?" Instead of answering with words, Damon kissed her. It was soft and gentle this time, full of promise and hope for the future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, Aria looked around at the pack house, at the wolves who were already beginning to clean up the damage from the battle. These weren't her people yet, but they could be. She could make a home here, a real home, with a mate who loved her and a pack that would accept her. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Damon said, "we rebuild, we heal, and we prepare for the future. Because something tells me that Marcus wasn't the only one who wanted to see the royal bloodlines destroyed. There will be other challenges, other enemies. But we'll face them together?" "Always," Damon promised. The Alpha King and his Luna Queen, united as the prophecies foretold. As the sun began to rise over the Blackthorne territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Aria felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope. She had lost everything: her pack, her home, her identity, only to discover that she was so much more than she had ever imagined. She was the Luna Queen, the last heir of the Silver Moon bloodline, and she had found her true mate in the most powerful alpha in the world. The future was uncertain, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in her life, Aria felt ready to face whatever came next. After all, she wasn't just a disgraced Betta anymore, she was a queen. 6 months later, the coronation ceremony was held under the full moon, in the ancient clearing where Luna Queens had been crowned for over 1,000 years. Representatives from packs across North America had come to witness the historic event, the first time in 50 years that the royal bloodlines would be united. The clearing itself was a place of power, where ancient stones formed a perfect circle, and the very earth hummed with centuries of accumulated magic. Torches burned around the perimeter, their flames dancing in the gentle night breeze, while the full moon overhead bathed everything in silver light. Aria stood before the assembled crowd, wearing a gown of silver silk that seemed to capture and reflect the moonlight. The dress had been crafted by the finest seamstresses in the werewolf world, its intricate beadwork telling the story of the silver moon bloodline in threads of silver and white. The real moonstone hung around her neck, its gentle glow a perfect complement to the white light that now emanated naturally from her skin. Beside her, Damon looked every inch the Alpha King in his formal regalia. The crown of the Alpha Kings, a circlet of silver and obsidian that had been worn by his ancestors for centuries, rested on his dark hair, and his golden eyes held the same fierce protectiveness they had shown that first night in the forest. Do you, Aria Blackwood of the Silver Moon bloodline, accept the responsibilities and duties of Luna Queen? The elder performing the ceremony asked, his ancient voice carrying clearly across the clearing. I do, Aria replied, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing, enhanced by the power that now flowed through her veins. And do you, Damon Blackthorne, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, accept this woman as your mate, your equal, and your queen? I do, Damon said, his eyes never leaving Aria's face, his voice filled with absolute conviction. Then, by the power of the moon and the ancient laws of our people, I pronounce you mated and crowned. Long live the Alpha King and Luna Queen! The crowd erupted in howls of celebration, the sound echoing across the forest and beyond. As tradition demanded, Aria and Damon shifted into their wolf forms and ran together through the territory. Their pack, their people, following behind them in a joyous procession that seemed to make the very earth sing with happiness. Later, as the celebration continued in the pack house, Aria found herself on the balcony of their shared chambers. Looking out over the territory that was now truly her home, the sounds of laughter and music drifted up from below, and she could feel the contentment of every wolf in the territory through her enhanced senses. Any regrets? Damon asked, joining her at the railing, his arm sliding around her waist. About which part? Being framed for murder? Hunted like a criminal? Or discovering I'm supernatural royalty? About accepting the crown? About mating with me? About the life we're building together? Aria turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. Never. Not for a single moment. Good, Damon said, pulling her closer. Because I have some news that might complicate things even further. Oh? What kind of news? The kind that involves the European packs requesting our help with some unusual problems. Apparently there are rumors of vampires forming alliances with rogue werewolves, and they want the royal couple to investigate. Aria groaned. Vampires? Really? Can't we have a normal honeymoon first? Where would be the fun in that? Damon grinned. Besides, I thought you liked adventure. I like adventure, Aria agreed. But I also like not being in mortal peril for at least a few weeks. I'll make you a deal, Damon said, his voice dropping to that low, seductive tone that never failed to make her pulse race. We take a proper honeymoon first. Somewhere tropical, with no pack politics, no supernatural crises, and definitely no vampires. Just you, me, and a beach? And after that? After that, we save the world. Again. Aria laughed, feeling the same lightness and joy that had become her constant companion since that terrible night 6 months ago. You know what? I think I can live with that arrangement. Good, Damon murmured, leaning down to kiss her. Because I plan to spend the rest of my very long life making sure you never regret trusting me with your heart. As they kissed under the light of the full moon, surrounded by the sounds of their celebrating pack. Aria reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. She had started as a disgraced Betta with no future, and now she was a queen with a mate who loved her, and a destiny that stretched far beyond anything she had ever imagined. It hadn't been easy. There had been pain, betrayal, and moments when she thought she might not survive. But every challenge had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life that was more wonderful than any fairy tale. And if there were vampires and rogue werewolves and other supernatural crises waiting in their future, well, she was the Luna Queen, and he was the Alpha King. They could handle whatever came next. Together. Thank you so much for joining me on Aria and Damon's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this tale of exile, redemption, and true love, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more supernatural romance stories. What did you think of Aria's transformation from exiled Betta to Luna Queen? And are you excited about the possibility of vampires in future stories? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest supernatural tales. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of true love and second chances.